Bear Independent Brief 17 November 25. Dependence on foreign technologies once again raised security concerns as Norway recently discovered Chinese manufacturer Yutong, great name, Yutong, retained remote access to the battery and power management systems in its fleet of electric buses. Don't worry, everybody needs an electric vehicle for all the reasons. Quote, this bus can be stopped or rendered inoperable by the manufacturer, end quote, the Norwegian transport operator Ruter concluded. The issue centers on over-the-air or OTA updates, which give manufacturers remote access and could theoretically enable remote shutdowns. Theoretically. The UK, Denmark, Netherlands, and Australia have all launched similar investigations with around 700 Yutong buses currently operating across the UK alone. Is it Ford that owns a patent on the concept that if you miss 3 payments on your vehicle, it will self-drive itself back to the dealer to save costs on repos? Yeah. That's okay. You'll be able to afford it now with your 50-year mortgage, so it's fine. To be fair, OTA or over-the-air capability isn't unique to Chinese vehicles, but the concern with Chinese equipment goes beyond the technology itself. Under Chinese national security laws, all citizens and organizations are required to help Beijing if asked, and they're all asked. As Arnie Bellini, founder of the software company ConnectWise, put it, the Trojan horse is already here. We did it ourselves. Yeah, lots of vehicles have over-the-air updates, and everybody say it with me. There is a persistent and ongoing zero-day exploit that affects everything that touches the internet to the highest echelons of American society. Yeah. Also, coincidentally, we'll see. Everybody, I'm sure you've heard of like the Simpsons prophecies, right? Well, allegedly, according to the Simpsons, 17 November 25 is the day of a worldwide blackout. So, let's see what happens. We'll see. Of course, these buses are just the latest focus, since the concern extends far beyond public transportation to power grids, communications networks, and even home security systems. As briefed back in May of this year, engineers reportedly found, quote, unexplained communications equipment and undocumented communications devices, end quote, inside some Chinese-made solar power inverters. The ever-present technology that connects solar panels and wind turbines to electricity grids and is also found in things like electric cars and heat pumps. Stuxnet is just one example. Stuxnet. It's just Google it. Just Google it. That's just one small example. Coincidentally, I spent a fair amount of time yesterday reading the entirety of the Off-Grid Solar Bible. Bible is kind of an audacious name for a book, but it was decent. And taking inventory of our solar systems here. Now, as previously discussed, especially on Patreon, think about the electromagnetic spectrum, if you will. Right now, it's filled with trillions of signals, probably, if not tens of billions, hundreds of billions of signals. Like every electrical device. You can't have electricity without magnetism, okay? And you can't have magnetism without electricity. They're inexorably intertwined. Ask Nikola Tesla, an alternating current, where you take a rotor that has magnets on it and you spin it inside of a stator of copper coils and you generate, because of the polarity changes, you turn that thing, 60 times a second. You get 60 hertz positive and negative alternating current, and the electrons shimmy back and forth across the wire. Magnetism and electricity go together. And so the electromagnetic spectrum is filled with hundreds of billions of signals currently. And then you turn it off, and all that signals noise goes away. But there are still signals. It actually becomes easier to target those signals. Not harder, easier, after you turn the big power off. So all the little guys like me that got their little solar system and their whatever. See, preppers will be like, oh, well, when you run a generator, then your neighbors can hear it. If your neighbors can hear your generator, you live too close to your neighbors. But that's just the thing of like, people don't take it seriously enough. That's fine. If you want to co-star in, Gen Z 2.0 or Population Z, whatever it is, right? Or the Hunger Games Part 4, yeah, go for it. That's entirely up to you. That's your threat calculations, your threat matrix. But for me, no. If your generators can hear, or if your neighbors can hear your generator, you live too close to your neighbors. But it's not just the generator that's prattling on nearish the house, running on diesel fuel, propane, or gasoline. It's anything that emits an electromagnetic frequency. Straight up. So that's just things to think about. I'm almost begrudgingly sad that the sun didn't sunburn us back to the Stone Age, and we don't all get to be Amish with rifles now. Shall we continue? Let's continue. As one source told Reuters, quote, that effectively means there is a built-in way to physically destroy the grid, end quote. Wow, no way. That's crazy. I'll resist the urge to be facetious. Quote, that effectively means there is a built-in way to physically destroy the grid, end quote. Since 2017, multiple countries have banned or restricted Chinese telecommunications equipment from Huawei and ZTE, citing espionage risks, and the Department of Defense also restricted their use in military networks. The U.S. has banned Chinese surveillance cameras from Hikvision and Dahua in government buildings and prohibited federal agencies from using Chinese-made drones starting December 2025. At the same time that the Department of Defense seeks to acquire 1 to 2 million new drones in the next 12 to 24 months. So, if you're into drone stuff, it's probably an opportunity to capitalize for you. Best of luck with that. Mike Rogers, former director of the U.S. National Security Agency. Oh, the NSA, no such agency. Good guys. Great guy. Yeah, they're the best. Definitely don't do any deep digging on them. Warned that, quote, China believes there's value in placing at least some elements of our core infrastructure at risk of destruction or disruption, end quote. Curious. Sounds oddly familiar. He suggested that, quote, the Chinese are in part, and by the way, this is not confirmation bias. I've been talking about this stuff publicly for 8 years. Why? Because before that 8 years that I've been talking about it publicly, I built a large portion of this grid infrastructure. And even if China doesn't attack the grid, which they're going to, everything, everywhere, all at once, even if they didn't, the number one enemy of the grid is rust. There's too much of it, it's too poorly maintained, and there's too much draw on the system. Coupled with, why do you think the Democrats push so hard for renewable energy? They know that it's bullshit energy. But Barry, you were just talking about your solar. Yeah, there's two different levels here. Point of use, small scale at your home, your office, your barn, for you, where it's consumed. Solar, and if you have the wind resource, wind are great options, point of use, because you can assemble enough of a battery bank to make use of the energy, not just when the sun is out or the wind is blowing. You can store it for later use. At a grid level, renewable energy it will never be primary generation until we fix the capacitor problem, because the current battery backup on the United States electrical grid is 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That's the backup capacity that we have for the grid, is 4 minutes. And until we get trillions of 18650 batteries all ganged together, we have no ability to store the power that is generated by the wind or by the sun after the sun goes down or after the wind stops blowing. So at a utility scale, it makes absolutely no sense. And the idea that it's green is complete nonsense. One wind turbine, 360 tons of steel in the tower, about 40 tons of fiberglass, 50 tons of fiberglass, anywhere between 600 and 1,200 cubic yards. So that's 60 to 120 concrete trucks full of concrete, about 80 tons of reinforcing steel. I don't know how many thousands of gallons of diesel that are burned, but 1,200 to 1,500 ton capacity crane, plus another 300 ton crane for tailing out the rotor, plus all the little trucks full of guys that are putting this stuff together, plus miles, hundreds of miles of copper and aluminum wire that has to be smelted and turned into cable, plus all the plastic insulation and HDPE, blah, 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 blah. I did the math on it. They're not green. The average wind turbine takes 38 years to offset the carbon output. So its carbon footprint average is 38 years, with the service life touted as 20 years, and in actuality about 12 years. So we're 3 times in the hole. If it's really about carbon sequestration, it's not. It's not. The reason that there's such a big emphasis during the Republican, George Bush era for renewable energy was because oil companies were diversifying. So at the time, the 3 largest owners of wind power in the United States were ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, and Dutch Shell, because they're not oil companies, they're power companies, energy companies. And then we get the Obamacare era of subsidies on wind energy tax credits, right? I'm going to put $2 billion into renewable energy. Well, dumbass, I've built jobs that just the high line to move the power from the turbines to the point of consumption was more than $2 billion. So sounds like a lot of money. It's not. Anyway, what's my point here? Why would the Democrats lean into renewable energy as a primary means of generation on the grid? Well, number one, it's controllable at every node intentionally. It's what we call a SCADA system, system controls and data acquisition. Fly-by-wire using fiber optics and PLCs, programmable logic controllers. We can turn each individual node on or off intentionally. And they all have back doors in them. Plus, it artificially drives the cost of energy up in the United States of America, which it has. Plus, I guess tertiary benefit, it engenders all kinds of, what is the word that we would use? It pisses people off. You get factions infighting against one another. But my bald eagles, but the bird strikes, and this is native land, and it's green, it's not green, all that. So small scale wind and solar, excellent at the point of use because you can get a battery bank to store the power. Large scale, we don't have enough batteries. Moral of the story. Mike Rogers, former director of U.S. National Security Agency, I already read this, but we'll read it again, warned that China believes that there's value in placing at least some elements of our core infrastructure at risk of destruction or disruption. He suggested that the Chinese are in part hoping that the widespread use of inverters limits the options that the West has to deal with the security issue. End quote. Air gap your inverters, by the way. But are these capabilities intended to be malicious? Australia's Mike Burgess, head of the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, said that the country faces, quote, unprecedented levels of espionage, end quote, and a growing threat of, quote, cyber-enabled sabotage, end quote, in the next 5 years. Super interesting. I feel like I've heard that somewhere before. He specifically called out, quote, hackers working for Chinese government intelligence and their military groups, end quote, that have targeted telecommunications and critical infrastructure in both the U.S. and Australia. Burgess warned they, quote, seek to maintain persistent undetected access. What? This is crazy. They seek to maintain persistent undetected. Listen, if I was good at doing the Bluey accent, I'd be doing it right now, but I'm not. And I'm actually not terribly keen on embarrassing myself. So just imagine that Burgess is speaking like Bluey. Seek to maintain persistent undetected access that enables them to conduct sabotage at a time and moment of their choosing, end quote. He explained what sabotage could look like, saying, quote, imagine the implications if a nation state took down all of the networks, or turned off the power during a heat wave, or polluted our drinking water, or crippled our financial system, end quote. This shit sounds eerily familiar. The list of potentially compromised equipment keeps growing. ZPMC cranes at U.S. military ports can track containers remotely. ESP32 Wi-Fi chips show up in countless smart home devices. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, it sounds like a war think tank if you ask me, noted that, quote, China's access to data and control of software and connected technology in the United States provides Beijing with potential tools to conduct espionage, influence politics, and in extreme cases attack critical infrastructure, commercial and government networks, end quote. The question isn't whether remote access technology exists in modern devices. It does. The question is really whether you want that access to be controlled by a foreign government. The rectangles are bad. Now, we are making an effort, to borrow a phrase, of cutting Goliath's head off with his own sword with these Babylonian rectangles of death. This windows to hell. That's my new favorite description for a smartphone. A window to hell. However, at some point, it's just not going to be a viable option. To say nothing about operational security, just the exploits that exist. If it's got a chip in it, if it connects to the internet, that ain't it, boys and girls. And people will ask, y'all have asked, well, when will we know it's time to stop? When I stop and you don't see my face anymore, you will know. Which reminds me, YouTube's very bad at notifications. Patreon's not. So if you want to get on Patreon, good morning to the patrons, the economic engine of the Bear Nation. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for that poll recently. That helps inform the direction of the content at the channel. So appreciate that. Links in the description, blah, 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 $10 a month. It's gonna get weird. And that's my primary concern for y'all, is that the level of weirdness that I anticipate should this thing pop off, and we're still at about a 20% chance that it does. The level of weirdness vastly exceeds the level of weirdness that you are able to contemplate, which means your OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, is going to be so jacked that that's going to allow the freedom of maneuver to, I gotta police my terms here, to frankly body bag you. And not just, everybody's like, but I got my rifle, I got my pistol, no, it's not just that. It's not just that. Might be some of that, but it's not just that. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Modern existence stops working. Like that. Now what? That's what you need a plan for. Now, do not despair, for we are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of our Creator, and we were intentionally put into the world for a time such as this. So be an overcomer, Genesis 32, Revelation 2, 3, and 4, to him who overcomes. Be an overcomer. Remember, there's no cowards in the kingdom. Revelation 21. It's the first trait listed of the people who are outside of the kingdom, are cowards. So fear nothing but the Lord your God, Yahweh your Elohim. But do the freaking things, yo. Do the things. Now, speaking of doing the things, first of all, covert threads. Their bear socks are back. The rock infiltrators with the bear logo on them. Best freaking socks on planet Earth. Am I biased? Yes, I'm biased. But they were the best socks on planet Earth before they put my logo on them. Okay? So, if you're looking for a gift for the holiday season, phenomenal socks. And if you have somebody in your life who spends a fair amount of time on their feet, working class individuals, which I deeply respect, or people that go for rucks, or folks in the military, get a pair of the Bear Independent Rock Infiltrators from Covert Threads. Owned by a jarhead, family-run business, American-made, best freaking socks on planet Earth. Next, RefugeMedical.com. What is this? This is a travel fact. Where did this come from? Well, you see, it started as an OPFAC, operational first aid kit, that was a request to be belt mounted. I got a float around and find out sticker on the back here. Not sticker, patch, right? Remember, totally not a spy balloon. Remember all that? Yeah. So this mounts to your war belt, but the request was it needs to be jumpable. And so then it was jumped out of airplanes 19 times to make sure none of this stuff would come out of here and hit one of the risers on the chute and cause them to flare out and die. And then it was like, well, if it's good enough for cool guys who are jumping out of aircraft to go assault enemy positions, it'll probably work in your minivan. And so the travel fact comes with the necessary webbing to mount this to the headrest in your minivan, your truck, your side-by-side, your whatever, okay? And then, of course, we have a Cat Gen 7 tourniquet up here. And if I need the first aid kit, I just reach in here, I grab the red handle, and I pull. And look, everything is organized per the priority of care for the March algorithm. Massive hemorrhage, airway management, respiratory management, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, everything else: expose, evaluate, evacuate, elevate. Now, we unapologetically make our stuff in America. It is unapologetically not the cheapest kit on planet Earth, and I'm good with it, because if I have to teach our air quote competitors at trade shows how to freaking apply a tourniquet, I probably, and this is true, this occurred in Houston, I probably don't want to buy a first aid kit from the people that don't even know how to put a tourniquet on. Now, I will say this. It took 3 years of y'all telling me to put Band-Aids in a first aid kit before we put Band-Aids in a first aid kit, because that's not really our ethos. However, I get for your standard civilian applications, yes, Band-Aids. So we have kits with Band-Aids in them now. But we are pre-hospital trauma medicine. And so if you need to get home again, this is the kit that you buy. Okay, that's my whole point, is to get you home again. It's not some price point bullshit. There are no concessions made here from a quality standpoint or a component standpoint. It's just simply the best, so that on the worst day of your life, you can get home again. Whether that's military, law enforcement, EMS, fire, or civilians. We've had, of our 161 lives saved to date, all people in all categories. Okay? That's the purpose of these kits. It has to work. And I would be unable to sleep at night if I sold pre-hospital trauma first aid kits that didn't work. So, if you need something, visit the site, refugemedical.com. Use promo code BEARNATION. That'll get you 10% off. Call the store, shoot us an email, or use the chat function on the website. And shout out to the creator of the universe for allowing us to wake up this morning. Please share the show. That's the only way that we grow. And I will see you guys when I see you, assuming that we don't have an international blackout today. And if we do, cool. Be Amish with a rifle. Figure it out. Solve for that. Y'all have a blessed day. Shaloha.